Welcome to Internal Affairs of the Mind, where we don't chase trends, but we chase the truth, where reflection is weaponized and reality's got no place to hide. Some people preach, some people pretend. Me, I investigate. I'm Greg Thompson, a retired cop with over 2 decades experience, but a lifelong investigator. And now, a full-time interrogator of the human condition. This isn't therapy. It's not philosophy class. It's an investigation into everything they told you not to question and everything you told yourself you didn't have time to. Let's crack today's case. Let's chop it up. Welcome back, family. Last episode, we talked about something painful. The silence people offer when we need their presence, the words people say when they don't know what to say, and also some of the discomfort people feel when they encounter a pain that they cannot fix. And if we're being honest, we know it's easy to judge them for it. It's easy to think they don't understand, they don't care. Oh, they should know better. But then after sitting with that episode, I had to ask myself a harder question. Am I seeing them clearly? Or am I seeing them through my own pain? I read something. It said, sometimes the person standing in front of you isn't the mystery. The person interpreting them is. Have you ever decided who someone was within the first few moments? Arrogant, fake, they're insecure. My favorite, controlling. They're cold and selfish. But here's the real uncomfortable question we got to ask. Were you reading them or were you reading yourself? Because the evidence is this. Your perception of others is often a reflection of the parts of yourself you've never examined. That stopped me in my tracks. Not because it's clever, but because it's true. And if it's true, then we have to grapple with that it changes everything. So today I don't want to investigate someone else. That's not my cup of tea. That's not how we rock here. Today I want to investigate the lens through which we see everyone else. We don't meet people empty. We meet them carrying every single conversation we have ever survived. Every betrayal, every disappointment and unanswered prayer, every goodbye. By the time they say their first sentence or two, our brain has already started writing the ending. Every one of us walks through life wearing lenses. Not glasses, lenses. Built from childhood, from rejection, from success, from love. And importantly, from trauma and from grief. See, there's an important difference between glasses and lenses. Glasses are designed to help us see clearer. They correct what our eyes aren't seeing properly. You put on the correct prescription, and suddenly the world comes into focus. But lenses are different because the lens you choose determines what you see and how clearly you see it. Put the wrong lens in front of your eyes, and everything can become distorted. People can look threatening when they're not. And rejection can appear where there is only distance. Control, well, it could look like consistency. Indifference can look like silence. And suddenly, you're not responding to what you're actually seeing, you're responding to what the lens is showing you. And that's the danger. Because a blurry lens is not going to announce itself. It doesn't say, hey, heads up, I'm going to distort this. It simply lets you believe you're seeing clearly. Every single experience quietly shapes the way we interpret the people in the world around us. The problem is, most of us think we're seeing reality, when in reality, we're just seeing our history. See, memory doesn't just preserve the past. Sometimes it quietly, silently edits our present. Observation can't be objective when the observer has never examined himself. There's a line I've heard over the years that captures this idea almost perfectly. It goes, we don't see the world as it is. We see it as we are. Now, I don't know that who gets credited with its origin matters as much as the truth inside that idea, because that's exactly what we're talking about. And that's why two people can witness the exact same moment, yet somehow they both walk away believing two completely different stories. Not because reality changed, but because their lenses did. Let that marinate. So every judgment, every assumption, every first impression tells us as much about the observer as it does those being observed. And here's the other thing about lenses. I'm not suggesting having one being the problem. That's not the lesson. Forgetting what you're wearing or which one you're wearing is. See, one thing law enforcement taught me very early, perception is not evidence. You learn the difference between what you observed and what you concluded. You can observe someone looking nervous, but you can't conclude they're guilty. You can observe inconsistencies. You cannot assume deception. See, good investigators don't fall in love with conclusions. They stay curious. But somewhere outside of police work, we stop doing that. Someone is quiet. Oh, they must not like me. Someone disagrees. They're attacking me. My favorite. Someone sets a boundary. They're controlling. Someone takes a little longer to respond, and we believe they're losing interest. We skip over observation and sprint straight to the conclusion. And see, ultimately, relationships pay the price. The best detectives don't solve cases by proving themselves right. They solve them by trying to prove themselves wrong. What is my instinct telling me? What is the actual evidence saying? They don't fall in love with a theory, because the moment you become more committed to being right than discovering the truth, well, my friends, you have stopped investigating. You start confirming and defending your conclusion. And somewhere outside of the interrogation room, that's exactly what we do to each other. We form a conclusion. Then we go in search of evidence to support it. That is what we call confirmation bias. We stop listening for what's true and only start listening for what proves us right and supports our theory. That's when perception becomes prejudice. That's when discernment becomes projection. And that's when the lens stops helping us see and starts telling us what we are allowed to see. And then we become prosecutor, judge, jury, and the executioner. Being wrong isn't the failure. Refusing to reconsider is. So let's use a very simple example of what I mean. Imagine someone doesn't text you back. One person thinks they're probably busy. Another thinks they're losing interest. Another thinks they're going to leave me just like everyone else. Same event, three completely different realities. The text message did not create the story. The story already existed. The event didn't create this belief. It simply knocked on a door of one that was already living inside of us. And that's worth sitting with, because most of our reactions aren't happening in the present. They're merely echoes from the past. Now, don't misunderstand me. Hear me clearly. Some people truly are dishonest. Some people truly are manipulative. Discernment matters, but there's a difference between discernment and projection. And sometimes the hardest part is knowing which one you're experiencing. See, discernment asks, what evidence do I have? Projection says, I've felt this pain before, so this must be the same. Discernment observes patterns. Projection recognizes a pattern before one actually exists. Discernment says, let me watch. Projection says, I already know where this is going. See, discernment leaves room for new information, while projection closes the case before the investigation has a real chance to begin. And that's the danger. because projection doesn't feel like projection. It feels like intuition. It feels like experience. It feels like wisdom. And sometimes it is. But sometimes it's simply an old wound that's gotten really good at making predictions. Projection is often just our memories and experiences wearing a disguise. There's an idea within the Buddhist philosophy that I think fits this perfectly. It goes, we don't always just suffer from what happens to us. We can also suffer from the stories we attach to what happens. Now, I know that's not a direct quote, but do you hear what it reveals? Think about that. A scar can protect you from touching the same wound, but it can also convince you that everything that feels unfamiliar is dangerous. So you start seeing red flags everywhere. Not because they are always red flags, but because your nervous system has learned to look for them. Someone takes longer to respond and your mind fills the silence. Someone becomes quiet and you interpret it as rejection. Someone tells you they want boundaries and you believe it to be control. And if someone disagrees with you, we interpret that as disrespect. And my favorite, here's the best one. Someone loves you differently than someone from your past did, and because it's so unfamiliar, or maybe familiar in some ways, you mistake the unfamiliar for unsafe. That is projection. Taking something that happened before and using it to explain something that is happening now. They are scars inside of us. And scars have a way of convincing us that every unfamiliar feeling is danger. We then take these scars and we judge people through windows that are dirtied by rooms we've never cleaned. Sometimes the person in front of us isn't the threat or the problem. They're simply standing in the line of fire of something that happened before they ever arrived on scene. We all have reasons for why we become who we are. Our history can explain our lens, but it doesn't excuse what we do with it. And the maturity is in realizing that your story doesn't have to become someone else's wound. Heal what hurt you instead of passing it on. Because the evidence is this: two people again can experience the exact same moment, but live entirely different realities. Because meaning is something that the mind manufactures. And maybe this is where we've been getting it all wrong. Maybe we're using the wrong instrument. See, a mirror is designed to show yourself. That's its purpose. You look into a mirror and you see your reflection, your face, your expression, what needs attention, what needs fixing. A mirror is very useful when we're trying to examine ourselves. But you don't use a mirror to see what's happening across the street. You don't use a mirror to figure out where you're going. You use a lens for that. A lens is designed to help you see what is outside of yourself and with greater clarity. And I think we do something very similar with people. We look at them through the mirror of our own experiences and then mistake the reflection for that person. They become our abandonment, our betrayal, our insecurity, our grief, our fear and expectations. We don't see them. We see what they reflect back at us. And then we call that discernment. But maybe discernment requires something different. Maybe it requires us to put that mirror down and choose the appropriate lens. A lens that allows us to observe without assuming, to listen without preparing our defense, to question without accusing, to recognize patterns without forcing them into a pattern, and to see the person truly in front of us without making them pay for the person who came before them. Because the goal isn't to see people the way we want them to be, and it isn't to ignore what they're showing us. It's simply to see them as clearly as we're capable of seeing them. And sometimes clarity doesn't require a better mirror. It requires removing the mirror altogether. See, for me, after losing Ansley, I wasn't always seeing the world. I was seeing the world through grief. Some days I still am. I realized grief had quietly changed the color of everything. The world hadn't become heavier or changed. I had. Joy looked different. Silence sounded louder. Goodbyes lasted much longer. And happy couples I saw, they weren't reminders of love. They became reminders of absence. There's an idea that keeps showing up across my readings related to philosophy and spirituality. The condition of the mind shapes the experiences of life. I don't think that means we magically create reality. I think it means the condition of our mind shapes the way we experience reality. Grief hadn't changed the world. It changed the way I experienced the world. The question isn't whether life has shaped your lens. It has. It always will. The question is, do you know what lens you're looking through? So more than 2,000 years ago, the Stoic philosopher Epictetus, he made a remarkably similar observation. People are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. To me, that sounds like a 2,000-year-old way of saying something we're still struggling with today. Life happens, and the lens interprets it. See, most people think self-awareness means learning who you are. I think it's something much deeper. Self-awareness isn't simply learning who you are. It's discovering the narrator that's been telling you who everyone else is. See that? That's a different level of growth. Because once you understand your own filters, you become slower to judge, quicker to ask questions, more compassionate, more curious, less reactive. We stop assuming and we start working towards actual understanding. So before you call someone cold, ask yourself, have I been abandoned before? Before you call someone controlling, ask yourself, have I confused consistency with control because chaos once felt so normal? Before you call someone distant, ask yourself, am I expecting them to heal a wound they didn't even create? Before assuming someone is rejecting you, ask yourself, am I reacting to what happened or to what once happened? Now, those questions won't always change your conclusions, but they'll almost always improve them. So now imagine this. Imagine if every opinion we formed about another person came with a receipt, not explaining who they are, but explaining where that opinion came from inside of us. Childhood, betrayal, fear, pride, insecurity, confidence, grief. How many of our certainties would suddenly become questions? So the next time someone frustrates you, don't ask, what's wrong with them? Ask, what story did I immediately begin telling myself? Because stories become assumptions. Assumptions become reactions. Reactions become relationships. And before long, you're no longer responding to the person, you're responding to the version that your story created. So let's end with this. Every person we meet can become a reflection of something inside of us. But that does not mean that's who they are. Sometimes they reveal our peace. Sometimes they expose our wounds. Sometimes they trigger memories we thought we'd already buried. But the real wisdom is knowing the difference between what they are showing us about themselves and what we're seeing because of ourselves. See, there's a reason I believe that Carl Jung keeps showing up whenever I start reading about the parts of ourselves we don't want to examine. Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist whose work focused heavily on the unconscious mind, personality, and the parts of ourselves we don't always recognize. And he had an in-your-face way of expressing this idea. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us towards understanding of ourselves. Hear that again. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us toward an understanding of ourselves. Maybe that's why some people trigger us so deeply. They aren't necessarily revealing themselves. Sometimes they're revealing unfinished places inside of us. And maybe the real flex isn't about getting rid of every lens we've ever worn. That doesn't make sense. Maybe it's about having the courage to take them off, hold them up to the light, and ask again. Is this helping me see, or is this helping me believe? And maybe that's the entire takeaway. The mirror is for me. The lens is for you. The mirror helps me investigate myself, while the lens helps me see the world outside of myself. Projection is what happens when we confuse the two, and discernment is knowing the difference. The mirror was never meant to tell me who you are. It was meant to show me who I am. And the appropriate lens is what I need to see you. So investigate your perception, and with intention. Because like I've said many times, the greatest investigation we will ever conduct, it won't happen inside someone else's life. It'll happen inside of our own. Because the hardest person to see clearly or face honestly has always been the one standing behind our own eyes. So before you decide who someone is, make sure you've met the person doing the deciding. And here's the only field assignment for today's case. The next time someone frustrates you, don't immediately ask, what's wrong with them? Ask, what did I actually observe? What meaning did I assign to it? And what evidence do I actually have that my meaning is accurate? Then ask yourself one more question. Am I looking through a lens, or am I looking through a mirror? Because that's the real investigation. And it has always been internal. This has been Internal Affairs of the Mind, where we break in, strip it down, and get real. So hopefully together, we can build ourselves back up armed with wisdom. Peace and blessings to everyone. Be kind. Be a good human. Thanks for listening. I'm Greg Thompson, and we'll chop it up next time.